So 78.4. 78.4 is the life expectancy of an average American, according to the CDC. And if you want to visualize what that looks like, I have on the screen behind me 78 boxes so you can see our life. Now, I have filled 41 of those, and here's the bad news for that. I'm closer to my last box than my first box. I've got gray hair, as you can see, and I've embraced it since I was in my 20s when I first noticed one and tried to pluck it out, and then I gave up. But here's the thing. No amount of Just for Men, collagen peptides, longevity supplements, and any of that is gonna change this fact. We all have a last box. We don't have to dread the box. We don't have to hide. We don't have to cover it up. We don't have to pretend that we aren't as far along in the box. Instead, we can just be faithful in the box that God has given us. Today is no different than thousands of years ago when Solomon wrote to God's people and told them to be intentional with the time that God gave them. My name is Mike Standish. I'm the family ministry pastor and one of the other Pastor Mikes here on staff. And today we're gonna wrap up our series called Made for Meaning. In week one, Pastor Mike launched this series with the idea that pleasure and achievement that we chase, they're nothing if God is not at the center. And then in week two, we talked about finding purpose and finding peace, and that only happens when we run the race that God's given us and we stop trying to run someone else's race. And then last week, if you were here with us or you were online, then you saw that Pastor Mike talked about the idea that we can't truly find satisfaction in money. But instead, when we see that what God has given us is a gift from him to simply be stewarded, then that is where happiness is found. So today we're gonna be at the very end of Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, and here's our big idea for today. You don't beat vanity by adding more boxes. You beat vanity by faithfully living your current box. So let's jump right into Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1, and look at this idea of faithfully living in our current box. Solomon writes these words, "Remember your creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them." So I'll admit and confess to you all, I have a problem. My problem is I forget things. Like, it's a real problem for me. My wife is helping me because a few years ago, she gave me one of the best stocking stuffers. It was like an air tag, but from the company Tile. I've got this little device I put in my wallet, and I've got something that hangs on my keychains. And anytime I can't find my wallet or my keys, you know what I do? I hit my phone and then this alert goes off. And then I begin the journey of trying to find where the noise is coming from. There was one morning, I could not remember where my keys were. So I hit the button and I hear this faint beeping sound. And I'm like going through the entire house. I'm like, I swear I'm getting close, but where is the beeping sound? And then finally, I just opened the fridge. My keys were there on the shelf of the fridge. I have no idea how that happened, but I'm thankful that I had this device that helped. I have a smartwatch. I didn't even wear it today because I forgot to bring it with me. But I love it, not just to tell time, but I use it because it has this wonderful feature on it. I can ping my phone. Anyone else out there that loves that feature? Yes. Okay, when Solomon talks about remembering our creator, he's not talking about, hey, we forget things like our keys or our phone or a wallet. He's actually talking about something far deeper that scholars call this covenant awareness. It's reorienting our whole life around God. So if we want to faithfully live our current box, here's the first thing we need to do. We need to remember our creator. Remember our creator. And the thing is, the problem we have today is the same problem God's people have always had. It's spiritual amnesia. Now, I've talked about this when I've preached before. God's people were rescued out of the land of Egypt. He had so much good for them in taking them to the promised land. And you know what they did? They forgot. They faced their first challenge. They didn't have anything to eat, and they start complaining. Then the spies scope out the land that God was about to give them. They come back with a good report, and their response is, there's no way we can defeat them. And then they don't have anything to drink, and then they complain. And what happened in that moment was not just simply forgetting about God. What they did is they reoriented their entire life around fear. And that's why they built a golden calf. something that they could see. And what really was happening was they were trading the mystery of this invisible God for the comfort of a visible God that they could see and follow. And God's answer has always been the same. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Don't forget who I am. I'm not some distant divine being who's just waiting like a needy person, just hoping and praying you'll want me. And then when you do, because you're so desperate and you've exhausted all efforts, I come and I swoop in. God, according to Solomon, what we know in all of scriptures, he's creator. If God is creator, that means he forms us. He forms us, he knows us, and that can give us confidence to follow him. The last couple of weeks in a few different scenarios, I've heard people nuance this in a way that I haven't maybe thought about so clearly. Maybe the question is not who am I, but whose am I? Like to people who just are following their heart and chasing every dream and passion and finding identity in their politics and their sexuality and their socioeconomic status, God is saying, follow my heart because you are ultimately not the architect of your own meaning. I'm the one who formed you. I'm the one who knows you. But Solomon continues and he takes it one step further. He doesn't just say, remember your creator. He says, remember your creator in the days of your youth. I love youth. I've worked with youth my whole adult life as a student pastor, and even now as a family ministry pastor, I get to hang out with the youth a lot. And I love their enthusiasm. I love the energy that they have. I remember 2 years into my time here at Grace, I sat down with some of our seniors who were about to graduate. At that time, we were so small, we fit around this table. And I said, I want to leave you with two things before you leave and go on to being an adult. Here's the first, remain humble. Like, be willing to hear wisdom from those who are ahead of you. And the second thing I said, it ran the risk of invalidating that first point. I said this, don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big or too bold. Like if you've been humbled and you've listened, then go do things that my generation never could do. And the benefit of youth is energy, excitement, availability. I had all of that in my first 20 boxes of life. I remember I was 20 years old when I first was an intern with our church. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't have any major responsibilities with my job. So you know what I had? A lot of time on my hand. And I hung out with students. I went to their football games, their basketball games, tried to invest the time I had. I had energy. I didn't get tired at 9 o'clock and just say, man, I want to go to bed now. You know, the older you get, the less time, availability, and energy that you have. And I think what Solomon is saying here that we should understand is use what you have well when you have it. A month ago, I was talking to some of the men at Men's Theology. And I was sharing what psychologists call second childhood. It's the idea of men who grow up physically but not emotionally. They just think Dumb and Dumber. And the idea is you get a pass. Can I just talk to those of you who are young adults or those of you who are teenagers? Like you are far more than Lloyd and Harry. And I think I know that because I know many of you. I see that you guys aren't wasting this time in your life when everyone else is gonna give you a pass. Everyone else is gonna say, yeah, this is the time you can just live it up, have fun, be immature. We're not gonna expect too much of you. To actually do more. Because this is the time that you have the time and availability and the energy. There's a pastor, his name is John Tyson. He writes a lot to men, specifically dads raising their kids. And his big thing is how do we help the next generation have responsibility? Let's not set the bar so low that we get the Lloyd and Harry pass, but we expect more because I believe and I've seen it that this generation can do far more than any other generation. And he talks about 5 category shifts that could be helpful for some of you, especially as you are getting started in your journey. And here's the first one, ease to difficulty. Move from seeking comfort to embracing challenge and responsibility. I mean, comfort is the de facto position that you'll have and that everyone will let you have. What we try to do with our kids is say, Standishes do hard things. I want my kids to press in and get out of their comfort zone. The second thing, self to others. Shift from self-centered living to serving and caring for others. Guys, this is ultimately what Jesus modeled. He looked not only to his own interests, but also to the interest of others. He was obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And following him means we shift from being so consumed with ourselves and instead focus on other people. And I think if we all just did this a little bit more, we turned the needle, we would see such a difference in our culture and our society that we see today. Third thing he says is this: move from whole to part. Recognize that you're part of a bigger story, community, mission. Life's not just about you, but you get to be part of a mission that's far greater than just having fun, but doing something with purpose that leads to control over surrender. Surrender over control. Learn to trust and yield to something greater than yourself. Again, like the heart of following Jesus, guys, is this. It's ultimately the moment we come to him and say, I can't do anything to receive forgiveness. God, I trust it to you. Save me and help me to follow and live my whole life. Instead of grabbing for control, I give it to you. And the last one that he has, I think most relates to this series in Ecclesiastes. It's moving from temporary to eternal. We trade short-term gratification for lasting purpose and legacy. And this is kind of what Pastor Mike was talking about last week. Delayed gratification that says, hey, I don't have to just live for the moment, but I can do things today that will ensure that tomorrow and the day after that, I'm set up for success and intentionality and greater purpose. Ultimately, what I believe this is first fruit devotion. That's the image that the Bible talks about. Usually in the sense of, in the context of generosity or the sacrifices that God's people would bring, but they would bring their first and their best to God, not their leftovers. And I believe those of you who are young adults, God wants your best years now. Now let me shift gears and talk to the other group of people in this room. Those of you who might be my age or older. We're a little bit more aware of that last box. But you know what gets me excited in this last decade? And I hope it's not the last decade of my life. Praise Jesus, those words do not come true. In my fourth decade of this life is that I would be the person who can pass on some wisdom. So when you're 41 and you hang out with students in student ministry, like you're the old guy. I just accept the fact I'm not the coolest, I'm not the most relevant. Usually what I can bring to the room is a little bit of wisdom and discernment. And that's why I try to step in. And some of you have some wisdom you need to pass on and actually invest in the next generation. We don't need to hoard opportunities. We need to give them away and be purposeful in that. Our student team went to a conference a couple weeks ago, the National Youth Pastor Summit. It's hosted here in Orlando every year. Levi Lusko is one of the speakers, and he talked about this idea that we start life building a box. And then the next part of our life, we fill the box. And then we get to the final part of our life, and what we do is we give away the box and all of its contents. And that's exactly what we see in the Bible. Paul, this famous preacher who wrote so much of Scripture, he gave away the box to a guy named Timothy. Timothy was a young preacher. And he said in 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others. The idea is this: hey, Timothy, you've seen my life. I've invested in you. I want you now to take the torch. I want you to pass it on to reliable people who then can also continue to pass it on as well. So I think if you've approached box 40, it's time that we start giving away what God has entrusted to us. What would that look like? Here's one idea. You've heard us talk about mentoring at Grace. I mean, some of you have been given wisdom when it comes to financial life. Some of you guys are killing it with your physical life. You're eating well, you know how to take care of yourself. Some of you guys have your family life, a relational life, your emotional life down. Instead of hoarding that knowledge and wisdom, what if you passed it along intentionally to someone else who wants to hear it from you? That's one opportunity. Maybe you start a small group and invite people in who don't know Jesus or just getting started. And here's one that's obviously dear to my heart. Would you be willing to join our family ministry team? When you guys come here on the weekends, you see that sometimes it's hard to find a spot to sit. guess what? It translates the same way in Grace Kids and students. We have so many opportunities and we have so many ways that people can jump in and come alongside of a kid or a student in a time where they actually need someone to ensure that the faith doesn't stop with us, but it actually keeps going. At the very least, can I ask you guys to just pray? Like, at the very least, pray for generational revival. For people who are just starting to figure this all out, but they're not slowing down. They love Jesus, they're not jaded. They don't say things like this, oh, we tried that, it won't work again. No, like they are passionate and ready to do more. Let's pray that God continues to work. We need their energy, but we also need your wisdom. You know, on my 40th birthday, I was cleaning some windows in our house. It's right when you're an adult, your birthday is just another day, and I'm on the step stool, and I'm trying to get off, and I forcibly stood on my foot as I stepped off, and it hurt immediately. What I wasn't prepared for was the next day when I woke up, my shoulder hurt, my entire body hurt. And it didn't make sense because I stepped on my foot. And it was then that I realized, even though I'm more disciplined, I'm more healthier than I ever have been in my life, I also wake up feeling 41. Now, some of you I know are out there, you're like, oh, bless your heart. You're so young, you're 41. You don't know what old is, but I do remember. I have a core memory when my parents turned 40, I was like, you are old. And when I turned 40, I was like, I have arrived. So yeah, I'm not your age either. Some of you actually know even more. And that's what Solomon is gonna do. He's gonna shift gears in verses 2-7 and give us this long poetic description of the aging process, which almost seems a little overkill, maybe if you read through the text. He's not trying to be morbid. I don't think there's like a shock value. I think what he's doing is saying, this is just reality about getting older. As you approach this last box, this is the reality that we face, not to dread it, but to be faithful while we can. So let me just walk through some of these verses with you guys. Starting in verse 2, here's what it says. Ecclesiastes 12:2. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain, here's the idea. It's like one challenge after the other. We just got out of the hospital and we're back again. We just got over this sickness and we have it again. And in verse 3, he continues to write, when the keepers of the house tremble, the hands that are trembling, the strong men stoop, legs that are weak. When the grinders cease because they are few, you lose your teeth. And those looking through the windows grow dim, your eyesight begins to fade. Tell me you're getting older without telling me you're getting older. Let me look at your phone and see the font point size on that phone. I remember the first time I had noticed Andy Lamb, one of our elders' phone, he was talking to me and I looked over and I'm like, dude, like that's so large. You're really gonna scroll for 5 minutes just to read this short text. And then he did this. And I was like, dude, you gave it away. You're old now. A month ago, I'm sitting reading something on my phone and it happened. I did this and I was like, oh my word, I am now old like Andy, but your eyesight begins to fade. That's what Solomon's saying. In verse 4, he continues and writes this, when the doors of the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades, when people rise at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint. Like some of you know, you're up at 4:15. Some bird outside your window was sneezing and it's like, I can't even stay asleep. I'm older. And I'm understanding the annoyance of this aging process. Verse 5, it keeps going. When people are afraid of heights and of the dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms. This is just a nice way to say you have white hair. And I know I'm getting gray hair. That's not a compliment, so don't see me afterwards and say, man, the almond blossom on your head is looking real good, Mike. The grasshopper drags itself along. Like this is the weakness of your body. I mean, I'm a fast moving person. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm driving behind slow people and then when I'm walking in the mall behind people who are slow. I'm gonna be that someday, so I need to change my mentality. Like your 20-year-old jump shot is not coming back is what he's saying. Like I like basketball. There's a reason in the NBA, you have 20 and 30-year-olds in the dunk contest, right? You don't find 40 and 50-year-olds. But here's where it all comes to an end. He says, then people go to their eternal home. And the mourners go about their streets. This is the end. This is the last box. This is funeral imagery. And then verse 6, here's how he says it. Remember him. he goes back. Before all of that happens though, remember your creator. Before the silver cord is severed, the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered and at the spring and the wheel is broken at the well. Every one of those words indicates finality, when it's over. But it's all redeemed in verse 7 when he says this, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. This echoes Genesis chapter 3. After Adam and Eve sinned, God said this to Adam. He said, by the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. I think what is heavy, I tried to make a little bit light of this, but there is a heaviness to the aging process. But Solomon says, hey, there's something to be redeemed in this, and it's this. Death is not the last box for those who follow Jesus. God has far more in store after that last box. And if you're living in the hardship of verses 2-7, or maybe some of you are caring for people, grandparents, your parents who are living in the hardship of verses 2-7, there is hope. And it truly is that the best is yet to come. We mean it when we say good is ahead here at Grace. It's not just some slogan we just throw around. We mean it. We put it permanently on our building because we believe in it. And I think there's not a bucket list on this earth that will compare to what God has in store for us for all eternity. Like my grandparents passed away long ago, but just think about this. They're far more alive today than I am, or even my kids are at their young age. And that is what we also can look forward to after the end. Ecclesiastes 12:8 says this, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. Now, meaningless does not mean there's no point in life. Like, if so, you wasted your time in coming here today. Pastor Mike mentioned this a little bit ago, the start of our message. It's more like the idea of vapor. Some translations will say vanity. It's here, it's gone, like a breath on a cold day. You see it for a little bit and then it's gone, right? It doesn't last long. So he's saying, hey, believe it or not, whether it's 78 years or even longer, it goes like that. And that's why, and you talk to people who are older, they're gonna say things like, man, the years flew by. I remember when I was your age. So Solomon is saying, hey, don't throw your hands up and just accept the fact. Don't try to hide it and cover it up and avoid anything that looks like the last box. Instead, just be purposeful and live in your current box well. He continues to write in verses 9-11, and he says this, not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to people. He pondered and he searched out and he set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. So if we want to faithfully live in our current box, we remember our Creator. But here's the second thing. We remember and we recenter our life around his words. Solomon is saying life is going by fast. And if we have little time, the question is, how do we remain focused with the time that we do have? And this is where this imagery of a goad is brought up. Now, I had to do a little bit of research myself. We don't talk about goads. We don't use goads today. A goad is a 6 to 8 foot long stick with a tip on the end. And a farmer would use it to poke the oxen to keep them going in the right direction. The purpose was not to harm the animal. Instead, it was to give just enough pain to make them want to go the right way. Okay, so let's put it in modern day times, like a shock collar for your pet. Now, I know half of you are like, that is the most horrible idea. How could you ever do that to a pet? Others of you are like, it works great. They felt pain once and they've never run out of the front yard again. So the idea is it's purposeful. And he's actually saying God's word can hurt, which might sound like an interesting way to describe the Bible. But how many of you guys like to be corrected? Okay, there's two of you. You are a unique human being that I do not understand. Like, I do not like to be corrected. It's hard to be told you're wrong. And I'm gonna actually venture to say this, especially today, the like worst cultural offense you can have is to tell someone they're wrong. Like, that is like the worst thing ever to do because it's hard to hear correction. But correction done in the right way makes sure that we don't get stuck and we can keep going and following what God has for us. Being nice is not enough. You know, I want my kids to be kind. That's one of the reasons why my wife and I, we have raised our kids to say, hey, look at an adult in their eyes when you talk to them. When you see someone and they say, how are you? Repeat back to them, how are you? Be genuine, just like be a human being. I mean, it's crazy. Target now has a policy that within 10 feet, you know what their employees have to do? Greet someone and say hi. Like, we've arrived at the place that we now have to have a policy to do what we should just do. Just be kind and say hi. But here's what I also know. I don't want my kids just to be nice. Like, I want them to be truth tellers who say and do hard things. When they have a friend, not judge their friend, but also not back down and just say, oh, I'll let them waste their life away. It's a dumb mistake, but it's not my place. No, like to love them enough to say, hey, can I just share some concerns I have? But let me give a caveat to this. Proximity determines and helps us figure out who to say something to and what we say to them. A couple years ago, we had Pastor Colin from Lake Nona here at Grace preaching. And he put up a slide that was really helpful. And it really laid out these concentric circles, basically saying, hey, those who are closest to you are best positioned to speak into your life, which kind of removes a little bit of pressure to say, hey, if you're really, really far out, we don't have the same relationship, and that's okay. So that means that I don't have to be the self-appointed truth teller for all humanity, to tell every single person what I think about them and how they need to change. I can just say, start with the people I know and let everyone else start with the people that they know because we all get it. If a friend comes to you and says something, it's far different than someone else coming to you. And I think the Bible actually shows us that. Proverbs 27:6 says this, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. I mean, it hurts. It hurts to be corrected, even by a friend. That's why the imagery is like of a wound. But isn't that better than some random person who just says something that's like flattery? Because this transforms us. This just puffs us up. As Solomon continues to write in verse 12, here's what he says. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books, there is no end, and much study wearies the body. And every student was like, yes, I knew that was the truth. Solomon's not anti-study. He's not anti-knowledge. He's not anti-learning. Solomon is making an important point that I think is an important distinction. And it's this: information is not the same as transformation. I can have all the knowledge and be the smartest person in the room, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I am being transformed by what I know. Now, information is also not to be pitted against transformation. Like, knowledge is still good. Jesus, as a human being, as a boy, grew in wisdom and stature and knowledge. So we need to continue to learn, but not think that that's everything. I imagine what Solomon would have thought if he realized what we have today. As he even wrote this, that he had no idea we would have a device in our back pocket where we could know anything and everything we ever want to know. Not just Google it, we can now chat GPT and get a specialized answer for anything and everything. And if you're my age or older, you remember there was a time when that wasn't the case. Like you're sitting around having a conversation. Maybe me and my buddies are like, hey, I wonder who won the NBA championship in 1983 when we were born. And you're like, do you remember? I don't know. Okay, what do we want to do for dinner? Like you just moved on because you didn't have the answer to that. But now here's the wonderful thing, but also the hard thing. We can pull out our phone and get any answer and subtly believe this lie that we are invincible, that we have everything, that maybe we don't even need God. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul talked about this idea. He pitted love and knowledge against one another. He said, knowledge alone just puffs up. Because when you start to feel like you know everything, then you lose your sense of wonder. And when wonder's gone, your awe for God slowly begins to fade away. That same conference that our student team went to a couple weeks ago, there was another speaker there. Her name is Megan Fate Marshman. So she was talking about this idea. And then she took it a step further with this crazy idea. And she said, just what if in your next conversation, you don't whip out your phone and look? What if you just sat in the mystery of it? And I was like so inspired. I'm like, that's amazing. But then I also thought that's a dumb idea because why would I do that if I can find the answer? But I listened to Megan, and it was actually later that day that our team was somewhere and we were talking and none of us had the answers. And I was about to pull out my phone and I stopped myself. And it was weird. It was weird to be in a situation where no one had the answer, although we could find the answer. But you know what that small exercise did to me? It trained me to realize this point. I am not limitless. I am not limitless. God is. God is vast. God is beyond me. And a small thing, if that's the very end of that lesson that I've learned that, then so be it. Now, I still pull out my phone now, but I learned an important lesson. I think in verse 12, this is what connects it to verse 13. When we exhausted every answer, there's only one answer left. It's this: fear God and obey his commandments. So how do we faithfully live in our current box? We remember our Creator. We recenter our life around his words. And finally, we respond with humility and obedience. Ecclesiastes 12:13, Solomon writes these words: now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. So to fear God is not to be afraid of God, not to be terrorized of God, to not feel like he is just this person to be in holy, like, God, I don't know who you are, and I will do whatever you want. I think what fear is to actually be in awe of God and to recognize that he is unlike us. He's holy. That's like we sang before. But the God is so different that we wonder and are drawn to him in greater delight and realize that we are not God, that we need him. Because when we have a delight in our heart towards God that is formed, the natural response is obedience. We begin to surrender to what he has to say. Not out of fear, like I'm so afraid I'll do whatever you say. Man, I love you. Why would I not trust you with my life, God? I mean, think of a compass. A compass doesn't argue with north. It just aligns with it, right? That's why you can trust the needle to always point north. The moment that we argue with north, avoid north, we start to wonder ourselves. And God is saying, come back to me. Come back to me and simply be humble. Instead of following your heart, align with mine, because I'm a good father and I will show you where you need to go. But you know what? This is hard. And let me just say, it's not as simple as that. If it was that simple, we would do it every day, wouldn't we? But all of you probably have experienced what I have, and it's, God, but what do I do right now? Because this is hard. And I think in those moments, we trust. Because every time I've said, God, are you sure you're not making a mistake? I get to the other side, and I always see he had good for me. In verse 14, here's how he ends the chapter: for God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing. That might seem like an odd way to end, but here's the good thing. Judgment is a good thing. Why? Because every one of us long for the wrong to be made right. God's not going to leave the world unbroken and unjust and unfinished. He's going to accomplish his purpose. He's not only the God that will judge every deed, he is the God who entered this world and took on our judgment. He obeyed the Father. He feared the Lord. His silver cord was severed for us so that we could be healed, and that is our hope. That's why Psalm 90:12 says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. God, help me to be aware of every day and help me to make those count. You know, death is certain for all of us. Physically, yes, but in 100 other small ways. Every Every time in this life, we experience things like death of a relationship, death of our expectations, maybe death of a dream that you had. And in those moments, we don't have to fear death because we walk with the person who conquered death himself, and that is Jesus. So can I just put that graphic on the screen one more time for you guys to see? We've got 78 boxes, according to the CDC. That is statistically how long we live. Some of you have filled many, and some of you have moved way beyond the 78 boxes. It's here, it's gone, it's quicker than we think and sometimes want to admit. But as we said earlier, we don't beat vanity by simply just adding more boxes. We beat vanity by just faithfully showing up and living the box that God has placed us in. So let me give you just a practical way to live this out. Remember your Creator in the first 60 seconds tomorrow morning. Like when you wake up, before you think about anything else, think about one way that God has been good. Try this. Before you open your phone, recenter your life on his words. Say something like this to God. Hey, God, I want you to speak first. I'm going to trust you today. Or here's a third idea. Respond by choosing one fear-driven decision. And you know it. What is that thing that's holding you back? Maybe you don't like to think about, you've been avoiding. Say, God, in the next 24 hours, I'm going to take one small step of obedience closer to you. I mean, death is ahead of all of us, but for the one who fears God, guess what? Death is not the last box. Whether it's the 78th box for you or the 88th box, it's actually just the start of a life that only gets better. So those of you who are young, give God your first and your best. Like use the time, the availability, the energy that you have at this age to do far more than I ever could do. Those of you who are older, like take all the wisdom you've collected over the decades and actually pass on that box and all of its content to someone who needs to learn from you. And for all of us, I hope that we can learn something from our shepherd. He's a good God who loves us, and he'll always take us to places that are for our good and his glory. And one day when that last box comes, whenever it comes, and we stand before God and he knows every detail of our life, I hear and pray that we will hear the words that every one of us long for, and it's this: well done.